It started with a simple plan, an evening together to reconnect, to unwind, and to let the world outside fall away for just a little while. My friend and her husband were visiting after what felt like ages. The anticipation had been building all week, a mix of excitement and something unspoken, something we didn't yet dare to define. We had always shared a deep bond, one that transcended words, but tonight there was an invisible pull, gentle but undeniable, that made the air hum with energy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the house began to transform. I had spent the afternoon preparing, lighting soft candles that cast golden shadows across the walls, laying out warm, cozy blankets on the couch, and curating a playlist that wove together nostalgia and emotion like a thread through time. The scent of dinner still lingered in the kitchen, rich and comforting, while glasses of wine waited patiently on the table, catching glimmers of candlelight. They arrived just after dusk, the sound of their laughter echoing down the hallway before they even knocked. I opened the door to find them standing there, arms full of treats, smiles wide and open. We greeted each other warmly, tight hugs, cheek kisses, the kind that last a moment longer than usual, just enough to say, "I've missed you more than I can say." We settled in, talking for hours. The conversation flowed effortlessly, weaving through memories, dreams, and shared moments that only we could understand. There was a comfort in the way we moved around each other, like a dance we'd practiced unknowingly over the years. We laughed until we cried, teasing and storytelling, while the wine softened our words and the music filled the quiet spaces in between. But as the evening deepened, so did the mood. The lights seemed to dim on their own, and the air grew heavy, not in a burdensome way, but with intimacy. It was subtle at first, a brush of fingers while passing a glass, the way we looked at one another a second too long. There was no rush. No one said anything, but we all felt it. That spark, that silent invitation to lean in, to explore the warmth we were already sharing. It started with touches, gentle, caring, exploratory. A hand resting on a shoulder, a caress down the arm. Then came the hugs, closer, more tender, more lingering. Our bodies began to speak the language our words couldn't. We kissed, softly at first, like testing the waters of a new reality we were stepping into together. And when no one pulled away, the kisses deepened, grew more confident, more real. There was no jealousy, no fear, only connection, built on trust and genuine affection. We moved like a single current, guided by instinct, respect, and emotion. We held each other, not just for passion, but for comfort, for the beauty of human closeness and the safety we found in one another's arms. Eventually, we found ourselves curled up together, a tangle of limbs and blankets on the large bed. There was laughter still, but it was quieter now, laced with sleepiness and intimacy. We whispered into the dim glow of the room, our voices low and honest. "I'm glad you're here. This feels right. Let's stay like this a while." And so we did. The night passed in softness, shared warmth, the rise and fall of breathing in sync, the occasional reach for a hand in the dark. We didn't need to explain what had happened, nor did we rush to label it. It was simply a night that felt timeless, a night where love, in all its forms, filled the room and settled into our hearts. When morning came, sunlight slipped through the curtains like a gentle reminder that the world was still turning. We woke slowly, smiling, stretching, still close. There was no awkwardness, only a quiet understanding that we had experienced something special, something rare. Breakfast was simple: coffee, toast, laughter. We cleaned up together, talked about the day ahead, and shared more hugs at the door. As they left, we all knew something had changed, not in a way that disrupted life, but in a way that made it fuller, more meaningful. It was a night of connection, of letting go and letting love take many shapes. And it stayed with us, not as a secret, but as a memory we all treasured. A reminder that sometimes, when hearts are open and safe, something beautiful can happen. Something that the sun was already climbing higher in the sky by the time I finally stirred beneath the warm cocoon of blankets. The room felt different in the morning light, less dreamlike, more grounded, but still wrapped in that rare sense of quiet intimacy. The kind that lingers in the space between people who've shared something unspoken. Soft breathing surrounded me. The bed was still full, my friend asleep on one side, her husband turned slightly toward her, their hands still loosely touching. I watched for a moment, just breathing it in. The closeness, the comfort, the peace. I rose slowly, careful not to wake them, and padded to the kitchen barefoot. The floor was cool beneath my feet, a small jolt of reality after the surreal beauty of the night before. I began making coffee, the rich scent quickly filling the air, grounding me further. The familiar ritual helped quiet the swirl of thoughts beginning to rise, questions, reflections, emotions. Was it a dream? No. It had happened. Every touch, every whispered word, every breath shared in the stillness of night. It was real. And more than that, it had been right. There was no shame, no regret, only the soft ache of emotional closeness. My heart felt stretched in new directions, like it had discovered a room inside itself it didn't know was there. As I stood at the counter pouring coffee into mugs, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find my friend in the doorway, hair tousled, eyes sleepy, but glowing with a warmth I hadn't seen in a long time. She smiled. I smiled back. There were no words, not at first. We just looked at each other, and in that glance was 1,000 conversations. I didn't expect all of that, she finally said, wrapping her hands around a mug I offer her. Me neither, I admitted, my voice soft. But I'm glad it happened. She nodded, stepping closer, her shoulder brushing mine. It felt natural, honest. Her husband joined us a few minutes later, yawning, arms stretching above his head. He looked between us, smiled, and kissed her on the cheek, then gently touched my hand as if to say we're okay. More than okay. It was strange and beautiful, this triangle of affection, built on years of trust but transformed in one unforgettable night. We sat at the table together, sipping coffee and talking quietly. Not everything needed to be spoken, but the things that did come out were real. How safe we felt, how connected. No jealousy, no confusion, just an overwhelming sense of emotional clarity. Later in the day, we went for a walk. The three of us, side by side, letting the cool breeze kiss our skin and the sunlight fall on our faces. The world outside seemed indifferent to what had happened, but inside us, something had shifted. We were lighter, closer, more open. There were small moments that said everything. An extra glance, a hand brushing a back, shared laughter that felt deeper than before. We weren't pretending it hadn't happened. We weren't trying to define it either. We were just being. And that, somehow, felt more powerful than any explanation. When evening came again, they were still here. None of us rushed the goodbye. We made dinner together, played music again, and even danced in the kitchen. This time, there was no buildup of mystery, just quiet joy in each other's company. There were hugs again, long and full, like the kind you give when you're not sure how to say goodbye. At the door, we embraced once more. No promises, no pressure. Just a silent agreement that this wasn't an ending. That what we shared, whether it happened again or not, had already carved its place in our lives. After they left, the house felt quieter. Not empty, but reflective. I stood by the window, watching them walk away, their fingers intertwined. I wasn't sad. I wasn't confused. I felt something stronger, grateful. Grateful for a night that had shown us all a new dimension of love. One that didn't need definitions. Only acceptance. And as I curled into bed alone that night, I knew something had changed. Not just between us, but within me. I had learned something about closeness, about vulnerability, and about the quiet magic that can bloom when hearts trust each other enough to open fully. Weeks passed, but the memory of that night stayed close, like a quiet song that played beneath everything I did. Life resumed, as it always does. Work deadlines, errands, long walks alone. But there was a softness inside me now, a knowing. That night hadn't just been an escape from routine. It had opened a door. One I didn't realize had always been there, waiting. At first, we didn't talk about it much. My friend and I texted as usual, funny memes, quick updates, casual plans. Her husband messaged sometimes too, in that calm, kind way of his. Nothing overt, just connection. Steady, gentle, present. But in the spaces between our words, something had shifted. The bond we shared was no longer just rooted in old memories or years of friendship. It was something richer, more layered, quiet intimacy, emotional honesty, and a growing understanding that what we had experienced wasn't an accident. It was something that wanted to unfold. We finally saw each other again on a Sunday afternoon. A quiet day. No plans. Just coffee and conversation at a little cafe that overlooked a park. When I walked in and saw them both sitting at the table, I felt a warmth rise in my chest that surprised me. They both stood when I approached. We hugged, longer than necessary but not too long to notice. Just enough to say, "I've missed you. This matters." We talked about everything except that night for a while. Then, as we sat in the stillness between sips of tea, my friend looked at me with that familiar openness. "I've been thinking about that night," she said softly. I met her eyes. "Me too." Her husband nodded slowly. "It wasn't just a moment for us. It left something behind." I exhaled, not even realizing I'd been holding my breath. "It changed something in me," I admitted. Not in a bad way. In a way that made me feel more alive. More whole. There was silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was full of agreement. "It wasn't about breaking boundaries," she said. "It was about exploring something real. Together." We sat with that truth for a while. It wasn't just romance. It wasn't just physicality. It was the emotional intimacy, the kind that allowed all three of us to be seen, fully without fear. After that, things didn't need to be rushed. We saw each other more often, sometimes alone, sometimes together. Dinners, walks, movie nights. But there was always that thread between us, tying everything together. We became more comfortable with the new shape of our relationship. More honest. More open. There were more moments, small, meaningful ones. Holding hands on the couch. A kiss goodnight that didn't feel like crossing a line, but honoring a connection. Falling asleep together again, not as a spontaneous act, but as a choice. We created a rhythm. Gentle. Respectful. Deeply connected. And though the world outside might never understand it, might even question it, we did not. It wasn't about breaking rules. It was about writing our own, built on trust, empathy, and genuine care. We talked, always, about feelings, about limits, about fears. No one was left behind. No one felt less. That was our rule. Love only grows where all hearts are nourished. One evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the stars blink into the night sky, my friend reached for my hand. Her husband leaned his head against her shoulder. We sat like that, the three of us, wrapped in the quiet of the moment. "I don't know what we are," she said, "but I know it's real." "Maybe we don't need a name for it," I said. "Maybe it just is." And so it was. Not conventional, not defined, but beautiful. A connection born not out of need or desire alone, but from a deep, soulful trust. One that grew gently, quietly, in its own time. A space where friendship, affection, and love coexisted, soft, honest, and true. And in that, we found something rare. Something worth holding on to. By the time spring arrived, our connection had grown into something steady, something deeply rooted, yet still private. The three of us had found a rhythm, a quiet harmony that existed between the lives we lived and the love we shared. It wasn't always spoken, but it didn't have to be. The closeness was evident in our eyes, in our gestures, in the ease with which we fit together. But outside of our circle, the world continued spinning, full of expectations, assumptions, and definitions. It started with small questions. A friend asking, "You've been spending a lot of time with them, haven't you?" Or a coworker noting that I always seemed happiest after weekends I spent at their place. I laughed it off at first. What could I say? That I was in love with two people who were already in love with each other? That we were redefining the shape of closeness? One evening, We were out together at a quiet wine bar. The candlelight cast soft glows across our faces as we leaned in, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet touches under the table. To anyone watching, we looked like more than just friends. And maybe for the first time, I didn't care who saw. A woman across the room noticed. She whispered something to her friend, then looked back at us with a blend of curiosity and disapproval. My friend noticed it too. She glanced at me, then at her husband, and gave a small smile. That was all it took. We didn't need to explain ourselves to anyone. We knew what we had. Still, when we got home that night, something lingered in the air, an unspoken question. Are we ready for people to know? I asked softly, curled up with them on the sofa, the room dim and peaceful. Her husband answered first. They might never fully understand, but that doesn't mean we have to hide. She nodded. We've kept this private because it was sacred. But maybe sacred doesn't have to mean secret. We talked deep into the night about what this meant for our future, for the world outside our door. We weren't looking for approval, but we did want to live honestly. To stop pretending that the people who made us happiest were anything less than the center of our hearts. So we started small. An invitation to another close friend, someone who knew us well, someone who could feel the closeness and had probably suspected. We shared it gently, truthfully. Our relationship has evolved, we said. It's not traditional, but it's real, and it brings us joy. To our relief, she didn't pull away. In fact, she smiled with warmth and said something we hadn't dared to believe. I always felt the love between you three. I think it's beautiful. That moment gave us courage. And though not everyone would respond with such grace, we realized something important. Our truth was not something to fear. It was something to protect, but not to bury. Over time, we created a space for our love to grow in the open. We still kept things private, intimate moments, shared nights, the way we wrapped around each other in sleep, but we no longer danced around what we were. When people asked, we gave them honesty. Carefully, yes. Kindly. But we didn't lie. And strangely, as we opened up, our bond deepened. There was a pride in being seen, in standing beside each other and saying, this is who we are, this is who we choose. Love, we realized, does not have to fit in one shape. Sometimes it grows outside the lines. Sometimes it stretches the heart in unexpected, extraordinary ways. And when that love is rooted in trust, kindness, and mutual care, it becomes unshakable. We built a life that made sense to us. Weekends together. Shared holidays. Late nights full of conversation and warmth. Quiet mornings with coffee and soft music. Our love didn't demand attention, but it no longer feared it either. One night, as we sat on the rooftop watching the stars blink into the sky again, I realized we had crossed into something permanent. This, I said quietly, feels like home. They both smiled, and without a word, each took one of my hands. No need for definitions. No need for approval. Just the three of us, seen, safe, and deeply loved.